Welcome to the Merrily End. My name's Mark Machado. I'm joined by Estelle Vasudevan in Colombo and Dominic Machado. Yes, he is my cousin and he's in America. We are discussing, we've just had moments ago, Sri Lanka finally announced their squad for the T20 World Cup. Dom, if you've got it up in front of you, do you want to read us through it and tell us who the travelling reserves are as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Wainindu Hasaranga as captain, Charat Asalanka as vice captain, Kusal Mendes, Patham Nisanka, Kamindu Mendes, Sadira Samaravikrama, Angelo Mathews, Dasun Shanaka, Dhananjaya De Silva, Mahesh Deekshana, Duneth Walalage, Dushmanta Chamira, Nuan Tushara, Latisha Patirana, and Dilshan Madhushanka as the 15. And we have four traveling reserves: Asita Fernando, Vijaykanth Vyaskanth, Banuka Rajapaksa, and Janeth Lianage.
Estelle, this is an emergency pod. We're giving our thoughts for it. Of course, if it wasn't an emergency pod, I'd have told people to sign up to the newsletter. The link is still in the description. Estelle, what were your first thoughts when you saw that squad be released?
Yeah, no major surprises, right? I think if anyone was picking a squad of 15, probably 12 to 13 of those were certainties, and then you had a few players who I guess you had to decide whether you want them to be in the main squad or whether you want them to be in the traveling reserves lineup. So I don't think there are any major surprises. Obviously a lot of people would have been expecting guys like Barnaker to maybe surprise entry into the squad, but I think overall, if you look at the 15, for me, it's, I mean, there are no major omissions or, any very big surprise entries.
Yeah, I think we all got a bit thrown because of the noises coming out around that 25 man kind of
Mm.
T20, I'm going to say select tournament that they held. But actually, Dom, this is quite similar to the squad that we saw go to Bangladesh a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah, I would say 13 out of the 15 have been regular starters in this side. Um, DDS is perhaps a little bit of a surprise, as is Duneth Walalage. But I think two things kind of make a difference. Both of them can bowl spin. And I think there is some chatter that many of these pitches are going to be slower and lower and more um, useful for spinners compared to, say, the 2023 50 over World Cup. India has four out and out spinners in their squad. I think 12 out of the 15 can bowl, which is a really big thing. And then I think the other thing that must have gone in the favor of these guys being in the actual squad as opposed to the traveling reserves is that they're both very good fielders. So if someone comes off the park, they're the kind of guys that you want to stick in. Now, this makes me think in the traveling reserves where you have Vyaskanth and Bonica, that if someone were to get injured, they're the kind of people who would be brought into the team and immediately put into the 11, right? I think they think carrying Bonica as a member of the squad isn't really useful if he's not going to start in the 11 because he doesn't really provide much value as a reserve fielder. And Vyaskanth, again, as part of he's probably not a sure starter for the 11. Wainindu is going to play ahead of him, and he's insurance in case Wainindu gets injured. He's the guy who they draft in, and he'd probably play from the first game that he's brought into the squad.
Estelle, there's lots to talk about in this squad. We're going to have to discuss Angelo. We're going to have to discuss Virskat. We're going to have to discuss Walala Game. We're going to have to discuss DDS. But let's start with Barnaker, right? Because he's the one person where it feels there has been quite a clamour in the last kind of 10 days or so to try and get him into the squad. Uh, do you think he was deserving of a place in this squad, considering he hasn't been anywhere near a Sri Lanka shirt for at least a year now?
Yeah, that's the funny thing with Banuka, right? Obviously, we all know what he's capable of, and we've seen him perform in international cricket and, do what not many Sri Lankan players can do. But the biggest concern is he hasn't really played any serious cricket for a while now. I mean, I'm just looking at his um, profile on Cricinfo. the last, apart from this practice tournament that they played, the last time he played was in February, in Dubai, for the IL T20, and in that he's played only one game, right?
Hmm.
So it's very, I mean, I understand why people would want him in the squad, but I also feel like, how do you justify that pick, right, when you've got players who have been featuring regularly in international cricket or have been in and around the squad, to suddenly parachute him in? His ability, it's worth it, certainly. But like Dom mentioned, if he's not going to be in the playing 11, and I don't see how he does get into the playing 11, right? Because it feels like it's more or less settled, where you would have Patum and Mendes opening, and maybe Kamindu at 3, um, Charit, Vanindu, Matthews, um, Dasun, and Sadira Samaravikrama in the middle is how they have gone about things in the last couple of months, right? Or few times they've played. So I don't know how they fit him into the team. So in that situation, it's very difficult to kind of justify why you would be taking him in that squad, because, like Dom mentioned, he doesn't really offer that. I mean, it feels funny to say that you're picking your reserves based on how well they field, but if you don't see him in the playing 11, and the only way I could see the Sri Lankans changing their batting is if they leave out Sadira Samaravikrama and play an extra bowler. So in that case, anyway, he doesn't get in as a batter, right? So that is one. And again, to come back to Dom's point, I think guys like Kamindu are being preferred because they do offer an option with the ball, which Sri Lanka would have trouble with, because they do have to fill that fifth bowling slot, right?
Yeah, I also wonder if last time Bardic had a serious run in the side, and you kind of, his peak for Sri Lanka was that 2021 Asia Cup. Um, Kind of the other batters weren't as fluid with their batting, weren't able to find boundaries as frequently as they are now. Were what, 3 years younger, so just weren't as mature. When actually, you know, Patam and Charith and even Kusal have all come on leaps and bounds with the batting since that time. And even though he is going to get you the big scores, and even though his strike rate is going to be high, it's just happening too infrequently, right? And actually, we've kind of transitioned away with the rest of the squad maturing.
Yeah.
It's kind of harder to justify his place in that 15, because as you say, he doesn't do anything with the ball. His fielding isn't the best. So it's kind of he's just one guy, one job, right? And we're not going to win the World Cup that way. We're going to win the World Cup with every guy having at least two jobs, right, Dom?
Yeah, I agree. I think the quality of the squad has drastically improved. You might ask, what is the difference between Chara Thessalanka and Banuka Rajapaksa now, right? I think in 2022 you could say, okay, there's a significant difference in quality, and everyone has performed. This batting lineup, settled batting lineup that Estelle was talking about. Everyone has done their job in that batting lineup. Everyone has batted well. We've seen good impetus from Charith, from Angelo, and from Dawson. And so, unless you're going to bat him at the top, and there you have Kamindu, who is also in brilliant form, it's it seems like there's no real way for him to break into the 11. Now, I think if someone like Charith got injured, they'd bring him right into the squad because I think they see him as a like for like. But I think you have to have people who could do multiple jobs. And the more and more I think about it, that's where if you're trying to win a World Cup, you want people who are flexible and can do different things, right? And especially where there's going to be condition variability, where some days you might want to play three pacers, other days you might want to have three or four spin options. You need to be flexible. And I think Sri Lanka is going to go into this tournament thinking they should be very competitive, and that to be competitive, it doesn't just mean having a best 11 that you play in and out, but you have a team of 15 players, all of whom can contribute and come in and do something when the conditions suit them.
Let's talk about Angelo again. Another divisive man in his mid-30s in Sri Lanka, maybe late 30s actually these days. There was never any doubt that he was going to be in this squad, right, Estelle?
Yeah, so I think, was it Dom or Nick who spoke about it in one of the previous pods, where it's basically a foregone conclusion, right? Like that he would be in the squad unless he was injured. And um, to be honest, after they brought him back, he hasn't had the worst of times. I know we weren't really in favor of bringing him back into the T20 side. Um, he's provided some impact with the ball with in the power play. Of course, Sri Lanka have not faced any high level competitors during that time, so that definitely needs to be taken into consideration. Um, but he's kind of done his job. Um, so I don't know if, look, to be honest, I wouldn't be playing both him and Shanaka in the same 11. Uh, but I think the way they've gone about things, there was really no doubt that he would be in, because I mean, why go through all that criticism and all that trouble talking about
Mm.
experience and all that to leave him out at the World Cup, right? Basically, he was brought back so that he would provide that kind of experience at the World Cup. Whether it's going to have a positive impact or he's going to have a good tournament, we don't know. It could happen, right? But yeah, again, back to the point, I don't think there was a doubt that he would be picked, especially after what went on at last year's World Cup and the thought process of the selectors as they had explained it.
Dom, how do you think the South African batting unit feel about facing Angelo Mathews with the new ball right at the top of the power play? And is that going to be Sri Lanka's tactic?
Well, I wonder if this is an interesting question, right? Obviously, South Africa has a fearsome batting unit. Their top order, I think they have a couple of questions there. So they're basically trying to decide which two openers they're going to pick, whether it's going to be QDK, Reza Hendricks, and then they have relatively young guy Ryan Rickleton, who had a really big SA T20. So who it's going to be, I think, depends. I wonder if Angelo might be best used as a power play option as opposed to a certain starter, right? So imagine if you have two left-handed openers, right? A team with two left-handed openers. You should be giving Mahesh the new ball, right? Trying to take advantage of that matchup. I think Angelo gives us the option to use kind of a medium pacer and get people kind of off of their game plan early, right? Because if you're expecting Chamira or Dilshan Madhushanka, he could provide a little bit of nuance. So I think he might be best used not as a all the time new ball bowler, but a sort of surprise. Oh well, we're going to start with Angelo Mathews, and we're going to bring someone up to we're going to bring the keeper up to the stumps here.
I hope whatever happens, he has the game of his life against Bangladesh. Like I think that's what this
Shakib is
the
back.
whole
Shakib,
yeah.
Shakib is back for these last two T20s against Zimbabwe. So I think he's going to be in the squad and more fireworks. I think ICC once they saw Shakib was going to be in the squad said you have to bring Angelo along to ensure that the rivalry continues at the pace that it has done so in the last few years.
Estelle's in charge of the thumbnails on this channel, which means that she won't let me have a big Angelo with a big red cross on it because I know that would break the internet in Sri Lanka. I think anyone who ever put that in the YouTube thumbnail will break the internet with it. And if it has appeared, it's just because I wanted you to click on it. I mean, you've got this far already. You might as well listen to the whole show and subscribe to the newsletter. Walalage is in the squad. I think that's the kind of the closest there is to kind of left field pick. But actually, I think he's good with the bat. He can do something with the ball. I think he's a decent fielder. I haven't seen anything suggest he isn't. I think he's a future match winner. But it is a bit of a surprise that he's in there alongside DDS and Kamindu, right, Estelle?
Yeah, that's the only one, like I said, I am a bit iffy about, because I feel like if you look at this, the 15, he's not getting in as a spinner. You're probably going to have Vanindu and uh, Mahesh Theekshana as your two frontline spinners, right? So I feel like maybe they could have looked at another batter or another quick, but isn't it crazy that Sri Lanka lacking left arm spin options right now? I mean, there was a time every bowler was a left arm spinner, right? And now it's tough to pick someone. I mean, the only guy I can think of who would probably, should have been groomed for a situation like this is someone like Praveen Javikrama.
Mm,
I know he had a lot of success in Test cricket before, but I feel like he could have been a decent limited overs option. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So Dunit is the one we have, and I think again, Sri Lanka do have a tendency to go with the all round option, right?
yeah.
I mean, Dhananjay De Silva has made it into at least 3 to 4 World Cups based on the fact that he's um valuable bowler. He's not going to bowl his full quota, but
Yeah.
he can give you 2 or 3 really good overs. Forgetting the fact that maybe he doesn't really fit in as a modern day T20 batter, right? But
Mm,
I think just to move away from the Dunit Velalage question, I think if you think about it, a lot is going to depend on the conditions, and even someone like Dhananjay De Silva or Sadira Samaravikrama could be a massively
mm,
valuable player for Sri Lanka just because they're not going to be looking to bash everything, and we might come across pitches where it's not really that kind of, we're coming off an IPL where everyone's scoring 220 plus,
mm.
right, in nearly every game, and people are
Yeah.
chasing that down. It might not play out that way, particularly in the West Indies.
Yeah. I I think just to sort of jump on this point, I actually think they're bringing Dunith as a bowler. I don't think they're
Mm.
thinking of him as an all rounder. I think there's some sides. So England basically they have six right handers up top, and there are a couple of sides that are very right hand heavy. India, if they don't play Gill, is also right hand heavy as well. Gill and Pant, and there are some international weaknesses against SLA. So I think they might be thinking that there's some games where he might even be a starter ahead of Tikshana. Think they see them as sort of like for like. Okay, so I'll continue on my Will Alagay point.
Cool.
So I see Will Alagay as a full time bowler and maybe a replacement for Mahesh Theekshana in some against some of these more right hand heavy lineups, or against some of these lineups where the batters struggle with
Mm.
slow left arm. Virat Kohli, also Rohit Sharma struggle a bit to get a good start. So I think they think he might be able to add value. The other value I think he adds is the under 19 World Cup in which he starred was also in the West Indies. So there might be a thought that he has a good sense of the conditions and that his bowling was particularly useful there. So I think that's part of the reason why they're going with Duneth. DDS is interesting that you brought up. He's kind of made it into these squads as like the 13th or 14th or 15th guy. And he's ended up playing actually in most of these World Cups, either as a replacement, coming in for someone out of form. I'm interested to see how they choose to use him, where they decide to bat him if he does come into the squad, because I think this has been a talking point. Using him down the order is not particularly useful. So maybe they'll use him for cover if Kamindu is out of form, perhaps, or if one of the top order batters isn't firing, or if they really think they need an additional spin option against a left hand heavy team. But I think you're right, Estelle. I'm curious to see how he gets used, and maybe it's to play spin on slow low pitches. But we have to get there first because we have no idea what the pitches in the United States are going to play like at all.
Yeah, like I said, that's the big thing, right? Nobody really knows how the pitches are going to play. And just come back to Dunit for a second. To his credit, every time he's been picked, there have been questions, right? Why
Yeah,
is he in the side? But he somehow manages to kind of exceed expectations. So I think maybe we might be a bit too quick to, or I might have been a bit too quick to write him off as well. Uh, if he gets the opportunity, he could be. I mean, he could provide some, you know, really valuable overs for the team. And like Mark mentioned, he's a fantastic fielder. He offers so much in the field. DDS DDS, we've had this discussion. I mean, before every World Cup, right?
yeah,
And it's of no fault of his, I think. because he keeps being put into roles that don't really suit his game. I
Yeah.
think finally the selectors have kind of realized that if he's playing, he needs to be in the top order, and I think that's a good step forward.
Yeah.
But I don't think he makes it ahead of Kamindu at this point after how well he played recently,
Yeah.
right? Uh, the next name I think a lot of people would have been happy to see um, was Vyaskant in the traveling reserves. I mean, we were expecting Vandase and Akil Dhananjay maybe to make the squad, but instead Sri Lanka have gone with just the two or the three spinners in the main squad and
Mm.
put Vyaskant in the traveling reserves. I'm really excited to see it because yesterday, um, when he did make his debut for Sunrisers, he wasn't bad. I mean, I thought he bowled quite well. He varied his pace well,
Yeah.
perhaps didn't come up against the best or most firing batting lineup
Yeah.
in the tournament, but I thought it was a good start.
Yeah, I thought it was a good start as well. And the win I took, because I think you're right that he had Cummins, and you made this point, brought him in a situation where he could succeed, right, where he was going to have a good first experience. But even Puran didn't really try to go after him. That's what I
Mm.
was thinking when he came in. I was like, uh-oh, Puran is going to see this young bowler who hasn't played a game and is just going to slap him around. And he respected him enough to take his time, and he hit, I think, a 6 and a 4, but generally was kept pretty quiet by Biaskan. The other thing I was impressed with is even when he got hit, and he sort of dragged down his length on both of the balls he got hit for boundaries, he came back with a really, really good ball. He had that mentality to say, okay, bad things happen, put that aside. I'm just going to bowl my best ball the next ball. And he bowled dots, I think, after both of them, which is really impressive. As we mentioned earlier, I think he's basically cover for Wanindu. If Wanindu gets injured, he's going to be brought directly into the squad and play. Obviously, it's not a complete like for like, but it is a like for like in terms of bowling. And that brings me kind of to another question, Estelle. Well, this bowling lineup, it sounds very, very exciting, right? We have a lot of quality. We've got Nuan Tushara, we've got Matisha Patirana, we've got Dushmantha Chamira, Dilshan Madhushanka. I think this is by far the best fast bowling unit Sri Lanka has ever fielded in a World Cup tournament. And then you complement that with the number 2 and 3 ranked spinners in the world for T20Is, right? Mahesh Deekshana and Wanindu Hasaranga and Dunith Walalage. The problem is half of those guys have been dealing with some serious injuries, serious enough injuries that it has excluded them from IPL play. So, what do you make of the injury situation? What do you think who do you think they'll start with, given the injury situation that we don't really know that much about because SLC is not very forthcoming about that?
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation, right? Because Vanindu's been injured, Dilshan Madhushanka has been injured, Chamira was injured and then has come back and is playing for KKR. Matisha is carrying a niggle. Nuwan Tushar has had his injury
Yeah.
problems, and so has Teekshana, right? So
Yep.
you basically have six bowlers who we would have dreamed of having as in the starting 50
Yeah.
or the main 15, but there is still that little bit of a cloud that hangs over it. And I mean, what's a World Cup without an injury to Sri Lankan
Yeah.
bowlers, right? I mean,
Oh
it
gosh.
seemed to have been like the theme over the last couple of tournaments that we've gone into. I think they will start with Chamira and Patirana if
Mm.
Patirana is fully fit, because Chamira to me is the guy who they trust to bowl in all phases,
Yeah.
right? I know
Like,
Madhushanka brings the left arm angle, but Chamira is the guy who, let's be honest, like if he's fit, he's been our best bowler, best
yeah.
fast bowler, right?
Yeah.
He's not had that many bad days with the ball. So he I think will be the number one name for the bowlers on the sheet. And then Matisha, if he's fit, and if he's not, probably they will go to Dilshan Madhushanka. I'm not sure Tushara will get a look in early in the tournament. I think his success is very conditions dependent. So if you have
I
a
agree.
bit of swing, maybe he will be a good option to have. I'm not criticizing him. I think he's done really well,
Yeah.
and could be a massive asset. And I mean, I could see a time where they play both Patirana and Tushara,
Mhm.
but I think amongst those four, you'd probably put Chamira and Patirana at the top, and then have Madhushankar and um, Tushara at number four, just
Yeah,
because of the variety it gives you, right? But
yeah,
injuries notwithstanding, I think this is as good as it can get for Sri Lanka, right, in terms of
yeah,
bowling stocks.
absolutely. And I think you're totally right, Estelle. I think um, one of the issues with Tushara and to a lesser extent Madhushanka is they have to take the new ball. Not
Mm.
giving them the new ball is a big problem. Chamira, you can actually hold back and say, okay, you
Yep.
can bowl the fifth over, the sixth over. They trust him to bowl anywhere. He's really good in the middle overs as an enforcer. I do think he brings value with the new ball as well because he can swing it. But I think one of the issues is that um, or one of the flexibilities that Sri Lanka has is they have different people who can take the new ball because Patirana is going to be backloaded.
Mm.
Right? We know he's not going to bowl in the power play, or we haven't seen him do that regularly in Sri Lankan colors. So I think they could go with Deekshana, they could go with Mathews, they could go with, if they decide to bring in Madhushanka or Thushara if the conditions are compelling. They have a lot of options and a lot of ways to set things up. And I wonder this World Cup more than others whether strategy is going to be really important for this team because we do actually have the resources to be strategic. Right, for this one game, we can bring in Dunith Walalage because they have a
Mm.
weakness against SLAs. Right, or this pitch looks like it has a lot of moisture about it. It's going to swing early, and there's a weakness against left arm pace. Let's bring in Dilshan Madhushanka and have him bowl 3 overs up top. So I think there are a lot of flexible solutions, and what I'm really looking for is I think this is the most talented, most complete Sri Lanka T20 team we've seen since that 2014 squad. I want
Mm.
to see them put those pieces together and figure out how to win games as a team, not on the back of match winning performance, but use strategy, use their fielding efforts, use their bowling combinations, use their batting combinations to make the most of the talent that they have.
Yeah, and the thing is, Dom, I think also the fact that the conditions are going to play a part, where we are going to have, or we are assuming a lot of talk is about how slow things are going to be,
Yeah,
right? I think that massively gives us a one up because our bowlers have always been our strength, right? That's why we struggle so much in India, because massive totals were put on the board and we just don't have that firepower in the batting to match teams
yeah,
like South Africa or India or whatever, right? But when it comes to bowling, I think, you know, of the teams in the World Cup, we probably have, on paper at least, one of the better bowling lineups, right? In terms of, I mean, we've always had variety,
yeah,
but in terms of, actually performing on the day,
yeah,
all of these players have put in match winning performances at some point of their careers, right? Like you've had Chamira breaking apart uh, top orders.
yeah,
Matish has been the second best bowler in the IPL
yeah,
so far, right?
yeah,
Madhushanka's, again with the new ball has destroyed a couple of top orders. And then you have the two spinners also who are massively impactful. So they've all had those performances. So, I mean, it's exciting. I don't know if we should have like massively high hopes. Uh, but I think this is as good as it gets, right? In terms of a squad. I don't know if I mean, if Banuka Rajapaksa had been playing cricket for the last year,
yeah,
um, then that would be the only one I think who could add a massive, like a
yeah,
leap to the team. Other than that, I think they've basically got that's the best squad that we can put
yeah.
together.
I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think actually, and Estelle, tell me what your thoughts are because I think you have a better sense of other teams' qualities than I do, being a homer and a Sri Lankan fan. But I think outside of Australia, who I kind of say are the out and out favorites, I think every other team has some weaknesses. Obviously, India is very good. West
Mm.
Indies in their home conditions cannot be doubted, but I think there are chances for this team to go far if they maximize their potential. I'm not saying that'll happen. That's very tough to do. And I think a big disadvantage is honestly the teams they've played are either Asian teams or basically Asian teams. They played New Zealand in 2023. They played Australia in 2022, but they haven't played England since the last
Mm.
World Cup, and they haven't. They played 3 games in New Zealand, but they don't have too much experience against those teams. Like I would say, against India or Pakistan, they feel comfortable going in there and playing against them because they've beaten those teams recently.
Yeah.
But I think against some of those other bigger teams like South Africa and Australia and New Zealand and England, there's a little doubt. Are we of that caliber? Because they just don't
Mm.
play them that much. So that's where I want to see them take the leap, is to challenge those teams, not just for one phase, right? They challenged England last World Cup. They challenged New Zealand last World Cup for one phase of the game, but then let it sort of totter out. Now that they have, I think of this 11, like the starting 11 we might imagine, really 8 or 9 guys who can win a match for you. You expect a couple of them to do it each game. You want to see a couple good performances that just take you over the edge. So that's kind of the next step, because we've seen a lot of talent, we've seen progression, we've seen decent performances. It's really on them to take that next level and learn how to win those big games at the international level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Sri Lanka, the talent is never in doubt, right? There's obviously talent and potential, but it's that putting in a complete performance that Sri Lanka have been lacking. Um, One thing also I think we should mention is the fact that in 2021, most of these players were just starting out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they've had 2 other World Cups now to kind of build into their talent and
Mm-hmm.
grow really. So I think that could be massively important as well, because I mean, you look at 2021,
Yeah,
we nearly made the semis, right?
yeah,
There is couple of close losses. 2022 was a bit disappointing, and I think again conditions
yeah.
come into play, right?
And
So
injuries, right? We
and
lost a lot.
injuries,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. We lost half of our bowling stocks, because I think
Mm,
that would have been different if you have a fit Chamira and
yeah.
Madushan. I mean, not that you necessarily make it, but the performances look different
Mm,
if you're not relying on your eighth best T20
yeah.
fast bowler, right? Yeah. So here's to hoping they stay healthy and we can see what this team could potentially achieve, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's, I mean, we have to assume that everyone will stay fit, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's
yeah,
no way we do well without a couple of those bowlers. But yeah, like I was saying, these guys have played a couple of World Cups now. They're a lot more mature than they were in 2021 and 2022. They've hopefully will have conditions that they would feel more comfortable with. So it's I think it's looking as good as it can. Sri Lanka hasn't been among the top 3 or top 5 countries
mm,
in the world over the last couple of years. So I'm not saying, they're the favorites going in, and I think it helps them also to go in as kind of no one's really paying too much attention to them or their squads. So that's, I think that's, they'd like that, because they want to go in there and make a statement in the tournament. Like the first game against South Africa is going to be
yeah,
massive, because
yeah,
South Africa is a team who you're expecting to really go crazy, right, with the bat. So if Sri Lanka can pull off a win there, I think that's going to be, that could be like a sign of, getting far in the
yeah,
tournament.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I think that game is really important. The group is a slippery group. I'm slightly nervous. Yeah, I think Netherlands and Nepal are solid
Mm,
teams. I was following the Nepal West Indies A series, and they have some serious batters in that
yeah.
squad. So I'll be watching out for that. And also Netherlands, as we know, is a very very feisty team. And when we play Bangladesh, we know all sorts of things are going to happen. So it promises to be very very exciting.
All right, I think we can wrap things up then for this emergency pod. If you're wondering what happened to Mark, his laptop battery died in the midst of it all. So Dom and I had to take over. If you've been with us thus far, please subscribe to the channel um, and the newsletter. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your sports news. We'll be back, I think, sometime next week